Well, hi there. The royal weapons have been kind of universally pandered by most of the community as being really bad. So today I basically just want to explore, okay, how bad are they? It gives attack percent substat. Also, I guess I should not forget to do this. Wow. And goodbye, 250,000 more. Wow. Anyways, this passive, right? Upon damaging an opponent, increases crit rate by 8%, max 5 stacks. A crit hit removes all stacks. Now, of course, this passive, because of the fact that you lose the crit rate stacks when you crit, you're not getting 40% crit rate from this. Where I think it's most valuable is going to be when you have situations where the way your artifacts rolled. Right now, my Emilie has 45% crit rate on this current build, and I think this demonstrates the nice middle ground use case. We didn't crit, and we crit, and didn't crit, so like right now, we have 2 stacks of the crit rate buff. I think the right way to think about this buff is basically that it's a pity system for critting, right? If you think about when you're wishing on banner, right, the soft pity for 5 stars. At the 74th wish, it's a 5% chance for a 5-star, and then it goes up by about 6% every wish from there. Like this is a pity system for critting on your characters, and that means it has more value the lower your crit rate is. And here's a nice little graph from the Genshin fandom website. You get more crit rate from the substat, the less crit rate you have in your build. The artifact system, right, the equipment system that gives you all those crit stats that you need is RNG. So you have characters like Emilie, right? She's a crit damage ascending character. She doesn't have the crit rate 40% for free from new artifact sets in Natlan, right? You can easily run into a situation where just how RNG went for you because you're a more casual player, you haven't spent 8,000 resin in the Deepwood domain, you're in a situation where you got a crit damage circlet like this one, and you don't have a crit rate circlet. Speaking of, by the way, look, I conveniently actually don't have a crit rate circlet leveled up. I do have this one, which is pretty bad for Emilie's purpose. This is my point, that I'm going to go with this weird low crit rate build in order to test the value of the royal weapons, right? That's the main context in which they make sense, is when you're just a lower investment player. That's the context that theory crafters don't factor in, because they don't know what your personal stopping point is as far as, what artifacts you consider good enough. They don't know what kind of content you care about, how much you care about optimizing your build, blah, 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 blah. I think these weapons, in the context of a lower investment perspective, are better than you'd think. And notably in the case of Emilie, if you look through the accessible 4-star weapon options for her, there's no craftable weapon that has attack percent substat. The only attack percent weapons that exist are 4-star like gotcha banner weapons like Wavebreaker's Fin. There's also Missive Windspear, which is the main weapon I'm actually going to use to compare against. And this weapon is pretty decent, right? It was an event weapon that gives a bunch of attack percent for free and gives some EM. But this weapon was given out 2 freaking years ago, right? So there's no accessible good weapon options for Emilie unless you pay for the battle pass or you get like these shop weapons. Now, of course, Blackcliff holds, I think, an important comparison. I'm going to be comparing to Missive Windspear because I want to compare attack percent weapon to attack percent weapons and like the value of just having more attack percent in passive versus having a passive that gives you a little bit more crit rate, simulating a unoptimal crit ratio build because of the fact that this passive gives you higher value. I don't want to change any variables other than like one thing, but I do want to show this damage calculator real quick with Royal Spear versus Blackcliff, because this is what I actually did in my stream a while ago and where I had the idea for why I wanted to get Royal Spear and make this video. We're just going to look at her level 2 damage over here, and we're looking at the average damage specifically. So Royal Spear without any of the crit rate from the passive factored in, you can see the average damage is 11,756. Let's compare that to Blackcliff. So Blackcliff gives crit damage, of course, but its passive basically doesn't work on Emilie at all. And the reason for that is Blackcliff's passive only works when the character is on field, and the character that is on field has to be the one that actually defeats the enemy. So Emilie is just like never going to trigger this passive. You can see with the same build, it has actually less average damage. Not much less, but slightly less average damage. And of course, right, normally you would want to do a crit rate circlet. And then you can see the average damage will go up to 13,300. I'm again trying to simulate this circumstance of, you just didn't get a crit rate circlet. You have a crit damage circlet that's good and you want to use that. The base stats, without factoring in the passive of Royal Spear, is slightly higher, right? 11,700. And now I'm going to leave this at 1 stack for Royal Spear's passive, Check that box, and now you can see the average jumps up to 12,700. That's a pretty meaningful increase. Now, I don't think the pure math perspective, to be clear, is the right way to think about the royal weapons, because again, I think they're interesting in that they mitigate RNG. They can make your build more consistent even when you have an inconsistent crit ratio, right? So I think the in-practice experience is actually going to be better than it even like looks like on paper. But I could be wrong. We'll find out. That's what this video is going to be. But regardless, you can see that the Royal Spear with this crit damage circlet jumps up very close to what the Blackcliff weapon jumped up to, as if I had a crit rate circlet on, which is why my prediction is that the royal weapons are kind of in this really weird middle ground, probably only relevant in a situation of, you know, you don't want to farm a lot for your artifacts. Now, to test the value of this, now I'll probably test this with Arlecchino as well, and the reason being is Arlecchino and Emilie are kind of in similar situations. They both like attack percent, they both ascend with crit damage. The increased base stat value of 5-star weapons means you should probably just use those weapons over the royal weapon or the Blackcliff weapons if you have them available for either of these characters. Now, we're going to use a team that tries to see a pretty significant amount of damage from Emilie. I'll use Bennett with her. Well, okay, Bennett kind of changes the value of attack percent, so that's kind of weird, but I think it'll be fine. Again, because I'm going to be comparing with this weapon to this weapon in particular. So we're going to use Emilie's burst in an AoE situation with Kazuha gripping enemies so that we can see how like often we crit with her burst, and because it's going to hit a lot of times in like a very short duration of time. Yes, and this is Emilie's build on Royal Spear. We're going to fight the Vishaps because this is an AoE scenario. And because of the fact that this is a set time frame, kill as many things as possible, I'll probably do a couple runs. I might not include all the footage, but I'll try to like average the time so that we can compare Royal Spear versus a generic attack percent weapon like the event weapon. I will at least include probably the first run here. Do that. That. And we'll just do that. Alright, and then we can use Emilie burst. How much do we get for damage, by the way? 81,000, very nice. Like, what's her crit at? She's at 45%. That means she just crit. So, I don't know. It's weird. We're critting pretty often. That's for sure. To try to leave her on. Wow. Okay, see, like, I feel like for 45% crit rate, I'm critting very surprisingly often. Or, by the way, oh, there we have 4,100 attack total. Very nice. Oh boy.
This'll brighten up the place. Clouds high. The birds. Teamwork is dreamwork. Let's call the leaves. Adorn my night.
Alright, 32 opponents defeated. I'm not trying to play in any particular way other than, you know, it made sense to use Kazuha, so I used Kazuha. That, please. Okay. 29, that was a little bit worse. 31 that time. 31 again. Oh, Emilie's burst is so satisfying in AoE. 31 again. I definitely feel like I could optimize my play here to get more than 31, 32, but I think it's safe to say the average is 31. So now I'm changing one thing and one thing only. We're changing to Missive Windspear, right? And yes, I'm aware that changing to a crit rate circlet would be a higher average damage. Normally you'd want a better crit ratio than this, right? But again, it's simulating that not being the case. I'm just simulating these are the artifacts you have, and in my case, these are the artifacts I have. Now this weapon, you need to trigger a reaction to get the 24% attack. Now, Missive Windspear, you have to trigger a reaction, and I believe Emilie refreshing the burning reaction from the pyro on enemies counts towards a reaction trigger for her. So, the point is, I think she'll 100% have the attack percent up all the time. Yep, you can see we have more attack percent than we had in the Royal Spear, of course, because we have the attack percent from the passive and whatever. And the EM technically might actually improve her burning damage a little bit too, so maybe that'll do something, I don't know. Okay, I could have recast. Okay, I played that poorly. But 32 for the first one, which makes me think like the results here are going to be, oh, it's just very similar. And again, it's important to remember this thing hasn't been available for 2 years.
This will brighten up the place. This will brighten
Oh,
up the
we're
place.
gonna get it. Oh, I hit. Oh, wow. Okay, that one was a lot higher because I just happened to have a burst that came back right at the end. I can tell you, even though I'm only on the second try, it does feel like that Missive Wind Spear is just better, which is not that surprising, based on the math, of course. Like, the average crit rate this is giving is not insane. But again, this stupid weapon has not been available for 2 years. I think I'll do a comparison to Emilie's signature weapon as well after this, because I think that'll be interesting. Okay, that time I only got 30. 32. There we go. Oh. This is going to be another 35, maybe? Yes, it is. So that means the average is definitely higher. Specifically, we landed at about a 32 average, which is 2 more fish apps killed. And considering Missive Wind Spear's average damage is very similar to the estimate for Royal Spear, that is an expected result. Now, it's possible I subconsciously got slightly better at playing that, so I'm going to do one more run with Royal Spear to see if I get like a 35 enemy clear there. Okay, that's interesting. I got 30 again. You could probably slow down this footage and try to count every single non-crit versus crit hit. Do like a full freaking analysis. We're not doing that, right? What is evident to me across those like 10 attempts there was that Missive Wind Spear, generally speaking, was better, I would say. But it also is vaporware. It doesn't exist for anyone who didn't play 2 years ago. So let's do a run comparing it to Lumidu's Elegy, though. I'm gonna guess we end up somewhere around 40 enemies here. Okay, I think I could have played that better, but it doesn't matter. The point of comparison, 42 enemies, right? Might be able to kill a couple more here, technically. Right. 42 enemies, good enough comparison, right? Not that surprising that it's that much better, because this weapon lets you burst a lot more on Emilie, versus I was doing like burst every other rotation, and this is an AoE situation, and her burst has stupid value in AoE. I guess the more interesting comparison might be a Jade Spear. Let's try that. Only 36. I'm pretty sure I could have gotten more, because the burst was really close to up, but a good comparison, right? Of Jade Spear probably is a better generic stat stick weapon than whatever. So this has been kind of exactly as I expected thus far, where it is definitely functional. So for this situation of having a non-optimal crit rate, it is a more than serviceable weapon option. But obviously I'm going to keep on using my Emilie on her signature weapon, because duh. Now, because Arlecchino is also a character who doesn't have, a free crit rate set, technically you could use MH with Farina, but normally you don't use Farina with her, but anyways, let's equip it to her. Now, if I leave my previous build, we have just like a normal, healthy-looking build, because I'm using a crit rate circlet, but we're going to switch to this, because again, I want to simulate that exact situation of the most valuable spot for royal weapons is going to be when you have non-optimal critting situations. I think this is an interesting thing to think about, by the way. You can go and watch my video. I did a no crit Arlecchino video where I farmed for artifacts that had 0 crit substats, and I used Missive Wind Spear, and I was able to 36 star with a team with Arlecchino where she was doing 99% of the team's damage. So Arlecchino is already in an interesting spot where she can get meaningful damage when she's not critting. So this weapon just making her crit more consistently with this situation of a lower crit ratio build might be interesting. I think we're going to remove the Causelwood damage factor in this instance, though, and we'll use Shalonen instead. So full-on buffing, basically no damage other than Arlecchino here, right? But let's see how it goes. Okay, I mean, I already feel like I'm seeing so many more crits than I would expect from a 40-something% crit rate Arlecchino. Good lord. 39 to start. One thing I have learned today is that at least at a baseline, Arlecchino's probably a stronger on-fielder than Emilie. Crazy. It's almost like one of them was designed to do that. Maybe the real question is, what would happen if everyone on the team uses a royal weapon? Probably be fine. I could definitely put all the teammates on this team on a royal weapon and it'd be very comfortable. 44 that time. 42. Played that one a little bit poorly, but 42 again. Only 40. And that makes an average of 41.4 for Royal Spear. Let's see how Missive Windspear does. Oh, I just realized, wait, Missive Windspear is not getting its full passive because we're not triggering any reactions to Arlecchino here. Okay, so this is not quite the fairest comparison then, which explains why it looks like we're getting a little bit less here. Not crazily less though, it's still quite similar. I'm pretty sure I could have gotten 40 there. I still think it's at least an interesting comparison, because, you know, attack percent weapon versus attack percent weapon. No passive on this functionally, and there is a passive on this is basically what we're seeing. Only 38. A bunch of non-crits in a row there. Royal Spear would have helped there. I'd say that with a chuckle, but that's exactly also what Royal Spear would do, right? It helps your inconsistencies be less inconsistent. Okay, 37. I don't think I need to do any more runs of Missive Windspear in this, at least not in this circumstance. It's obviously less, and I could very much feel that while combat was happening, that I was killing things less quickly. I think we'll do a run with my Homa build, because I think this will be an interesting point of comparison again to a 5-star static weapon with an optimized build. $47. Yep, surprise, Staff of Homa is better than both of them. Although I only got 3 more enemies killed than the highest run I had with Royal Spear, which is kind of funny. That means Royal Spear is basically the same as Homa. No, that is not the conclusion. The conclusion, I think, is exactly what was predicted based on, like, you know, math, as well as what I yapped about where in the lower crit rate you have, right, the lower invested your build is, right, the less you want to lose your mind farming for the right circlet with optimal crit ratios, yada yada, the more valuable the royal weapons are. The larger part of the conversation is more actually in conjunction with the other weapons that are available for a given character, right? Like if we look at sword characters, I think are an interesting context. Like what if you want to do Royal Sword, Kaching, or Alhaitham, right? They don't ascend in crit rate. Maybe something like the royal weapon could be good on them. And you could say yes, except there's like this weapon that exists, right? I think the problem with the royal weapons is, generally speaking, that for most characters and like most weapon types, we have compelling other options to use that work on characters that aren't the royal weapons. Not that it's a direct one-to-one comparison to say Harbinger of Dawn is always better than the royal weapons. Depends how relevant the base attack is. The polearm weapon types is where I think the royal weapons could find the most use cases, like with Arlecchino and Emilie. It is a more than usable weapon, which is mostly just because, again, there's not that many polearms available that are free-to-play accessible weapons that just give valuable stats. This gives valuable stats for any unit that wants crit and attack, and that's kind of it. But it's also invalidated the moment you just choose to buy like a deathmatch, right, from the battle pass, or the moment you get 5-star stat stick weapons. That's the end conclusion. I think they are not nearly as bad as they're deserved to be treated as, and I think if you are someone who doesn't like to farm that much for artifacts, I think you might actually be in a circumstance where they could be valuable to you. The royal weapons are not good because of the fact that most characters don't need them because we have other weapons available, or other ways of getting crit. Kniech could be someone that the royal weapons could be usable on, except we have an artifact set that gives a bunch of crit rate for free, and he has a really good craftable weapon that like it's just like not relevant to get royal greatsword for him. I think they're not bad for low investment players, but they're not relevant probably to most long-term players. Use your Star Glitter wisely though, because for most players, Star Glitter is probably a pretty limited resource. Hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to subscribe. Check out my account fixing series or something. People seem to like those.